This is the Tigris River, which stretches for about 1,180 miles. 880 miles of its course run through Iraq, 250 miles through Turkey, and just a little bit flows through Syria. In 2018, Turkey built a dam on the river. It became a huge source of electricity and, thanks to its reservoir, allowed irrigation of vast areas that were previously unsuitable for farming. Despite facing serious financial difficulties during this project, a ton of criticism, and even a military attack on its site, the country's definitely happy. It's getting way too many benefits in return. But it looks like only Turkey is reaping the rewards of the dam, while Iraq, further down the river, ended up dealing with a full-blown water crisis. And along with all the benefits, Turkey got some big problems, because of which they had to add wheels to ancient landmarks and do everything they could to save Turkish cultural heritage. Overall, it's pretty complicated, so let's figure it out. The dam we're talking about is called Ilisu. It's part of a project called the Southeastern Anatolia Project, or GAP for short, which cost $32 billion. Why such a high price tag? Well, the project turned out to be truly massive. Its goal is to improve the region of the same name, Southeastern Anatolia, which covers just over 29,000 square miles, or 9.7% of Turkey's total area. To list all the ways this huge area started improving, it might take a whole separate video because GAP is divided into a bunch of smaller projects like environmental work, wastewater reuse for irrigation, a reforestation project, and much more. However, if we focus on the main point, the goal of GAP and its key projects were dams. A lot of dams, through which the Turks plan to seriously change the situation in the region. Here's the flagship of the entire project, the Ataturk Dam, built in 1992. It stands 554 feet tall, stretches 594 feet long, and the created reservoir holds 13 trillion gallons of water. This massive water storage has made it possible to irrigate almost 3,500 square miles of farmland through a system of tunnels. They, by the way, are the largest in the world built for irrigation purposes. To give you an idea, the flow through these artificial waterways is about 87,000 gallons per second, which is 1/3 of the total flow of the Euphrates. As for power generation, that's covered too. The Ataturk Dam is equipped with a hydroelectric power plant. No wonder this facility is called the flagship of GAP. It's the largest power source among all the dams in the project, boasting 2,400 megawatts of capacity and 8,900 gigawatt hours of yearly output. To put it in perspective, this single power source could supply all of Latvia's electricity needs with some to spare. So far, the GAP project has installed 14 dams across the Tigris and Euphrates rivers with a total capacity of nearly 7,000 megawatts and an annual energy production of about 25,000 gigawatt hours. This is about 7.5% of Turkey's total electricity production for 2023. Back then, the figure reached 328,000 gigawatt hours. It doesn't seem like much, but remember, the main goal of the GAP project is to develop southeastern Anatolia. In this case, the hydropower plants built on the Euphrates and Tigris cover most of the energy needs. At the same time, the GAP project significantly improved the region's agriculture, which is especially noticeable in cotton farming. This is a crop that heavily depends on water. Actually, even more than that, cotton's one of the most water-dependent crops overall. Before the GAP project was launched, cotton production in the region didn't exceed 150,000 tons per year. However, by 2001, even though there were fewer dams and reservoirs created by them than there are now, production had increased significantly to 400,000 tons. Right now, southeastern Anatolia grows almost 60% of all the cotton in Turkey, and it's only going to increase because not all the planned infrastructure has been built yet. Once it's done, the area of farmland will reach 6,500 square miles, which will allow for even more cotton to be grown, and other crops too. Thanks to the bigger harvest and the new industries powered by fresh energy sources, export value in 2023 hit $13.6 billion, which is a huge jump from the $689 million earned in 2002. In short, plenty of upsides, and more upsides. However, dams, as often happens, create a lot of problems. This is especially true for Ilisu, which is causing a disaster in Iraq and negatively affecting Turkey itself. The cost was $1.7 billion, putting it alongside other major megadams from other countries. However, in order to gather this money and finally build their creation, Turkey had to go through many challenges. Initially, the country decided to seek funding for the construction from abroad, but environmental and human rights groups immediately understood if the dam was completed, a local disaster would follow. In the end, in 2000, under the pressure of all the opponents, the British government refused the funding of $236 million. Then Germany, Switzerland, and Austria expressed their interest in providing funding. They agreed to $610 million. However, by 2008, the desire to invest in the dam was gone. Turkey was told that within 180 days, Ilisu must meet more than 150 international standards. Obviously, in that time, the Turks didn't manage to do anything, which is why in 2009, the European countries officially stopped the funding. Despite this, the Turkish authorities decided that the dam would still be completed and nothing could stop them. The construction, which began in 2006, was finished in 2018. The only thing that the funding issues led to was a 2-year delay in the completion. And you know what the Turks deserve praise for? It's for finishing the Ilisu Dam even though it was attacked by armed forces in 2014. So the dam has been built, standing 443 feet high and 6,000 feet long, designed to create a reservoir with a capacity of 2.7 trillion gallons. Because of this giant reservoir, Ilisu makes it possible to irrigate many areas that were previously not suitable for farming, especially for growing cotton. In addition, the government announced at the start of construction that the dam project would create 10,000 jobs and boost tourism because many people would be interested in the resulting reservoir. And of course, Ilisu means electricity. Its installed capacity reaches 1,200 megawatts, and the annual generation is 3,833 gigawatt hours. Overall, from the very beginning, the dam was marked as an important piece in the larger GAP project aimed at developing Southeast Anatolia. However, for obvious reasons, no one in the government really focused on why everyone refused to fund it. Building the dam was bound to cause a disaster for neighboring Iraq. Look, although Iraq is the country through which most of the Tigris River runs, the waterway actually starts in Turkey. The new dam blocks the river because of the reservoir and water diversion to grow cotton and everything else, so the country downstream gets much less water. At the same time, the Tigris and Euphrates together provide more than 98% of Iraq's usable water. People drink from these rivers, use the water for washing, and then go to work on the fields, which are irrigated in the same way thanks to the water coming from Turkey. It's clear that even a small reduction in the water flow of any of these rivers can have a serious impact on the life of an entire country, especially if we're talking about the mega dam built in Turkey. We warned Iraq 10 years ago and told them to start storing water and building dams for your country and your people. Why should water be wasted in the Arabian Gulf without benefiting anyone? These are the words of Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the president of Turkey, which he said at the beginning of June 2018 after the reservoir of the Ilisu Dam started being filled. As you can see, these words didn't help Iraq at all. There was information that the amount of water coming into the country from the dam and its reservoir would decrease from 5.5 trillion to 2.5 trillion gallons. That's more than a 50% decrease. In 2018, though, the filling of the reservoir was stopped at Turkey's initiative. In 2019, the reservoir looked like this, basically nothing at all. But in 2022, the filling resumed. So what happened as a result? In 2022, information came out that Iraq receives only 36% of the 165,000 gallons per second that used to flow into the country, which is why large areas of the country are doomed to face shortages. For example, in southern Iraq, some farmers grew wheat on land covering more than 2,500 acres, but after the water flow was reduced, the land became completely barren. Besides that, the swamps called Chibiish were also affected. Buffalo carcasses were floating along the shores, and the lush greenery had turned yellow due to salinization caused by insufficient fresh water flow. What should Iraq do in such a situation? Negotiate with Turkey to release enough water for its neighbor. In principle, this is what the countries are currently working on. But as always, there are complications. In the same 2022, Turkey's State Hydraulics Works claimed that Ankara was fulfilling its neighbor's request and releasing at least 79,000 gallons per second in the summer months when shortages are common. Iraq, in turn, is not happy, as relying on such special measures makes it difficult to plan water consumption. It seems like there's no way out. Iraq and Turkey will continue to clash, each claiming completely different facts. However, in 2024, it turned out that things were much better. Erdogan came to Iraq, and after that, it was announced that the two countries signed an agreement to jointly implement some projects and optimize water usage. We hope that's how it'll go, but Iraq shouldn't relax. It needs to develop its water infrastructure. So where did the idea come from that the country has problems with this? No, not because of that phrase Erdogan said after the opening of the Ilisu Dam. One of the Iraqi ambassadors stated that his side mistakenly informed the Turks 70% of Iraq's water is wasted due to ancient farming methods. These words were exactly what led Ankara to demand that Iraq first reform itself, but these are just words inserted into one of the articles, though there's information from UNESCO that partly confirms them. For instance, a survey of 31,000 miles of irrigation channels in 2015 showed that only 20% of them are lined with concrete, meaning that there are huge losses in Iraq's water system. Actually, researchers concluded that the entire irrigation infrastructure is outdated and in poor condition, including pump stations, most of which were built in the 1970s. Overall, it calls for improvements that would reduce dependence on any agreements. Also, it's worth reminding that the Turkish GAP project is not just the Ilisu Dam, but a huge number of other river blockers. This concerns not only the Tigris, but also the Euphrates, and since the Turks haven't finished the project, Iraq expects the construction of a few more dams. There's no way to avoid improving infrastructure here. By the way, remember we said that the dams affect not only Iraq, but also Turkey itself? You're looking at the city of Hasankeyf. It's such an ancient settlement that over its history, it's had many names from different cultures. Just think how many civilizations, peoples, and just regular people have been here over the 10,000 years during which, according to scientists, this settlement has existed. It was around during the Middle Bronze Age and then the Late Bronze Age. During the Roman Empire, the city was a base for legionnaires. By the 630s, it was conquered by Muslim forces. The city stood in its place during the Artukid period from 1102 to 1232, the Ayyubid period and Mongol periods from 1232 to 1432, and also during the Ottoman Empire. In short, Hasankeyf is a city that's seen a lot, including modern settlement, when over 4,000 Turks from today's era started living there. According to many people, all these ancient views look like they haven't changed at all over the centuries. Thousands of caves, temples, and tombs, all of it just stood there and still stands within the city limits. Many of the city's residents, by the way, lived in caves located not far from it. Living in an actual ancient monument is, at the very least, unusual. It feels like a place like this should be preserved by all means, just like other ancient settlements. Overall, that's what Turkey did when it declared it a protected area in 1981. However, progress often goes against preserving cultural heritage. That's exactly what happened this time too, because 35 miles downstream on the Tigris River, Turkey planned to build the massive Ilisu Dam. Everyone immediately realized what was coming for this treasure of a Turkish city. It would simply be flooded. The locals went all out to show that Hasankeyf should be recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which could then be protected on an international level. But it didn't work out, because as the organization stated, the Turkish government needed to officially submit a request. The threat pushed the World Monuments Fund to add Hasankeyf to its watch list of the 100 most vulnerable sites in the world. Yes, this raised awareness that Turkey had decided to wipe out the ancient city, but it didn't lead to any serious consideration of alternative plans where Hasankeyf would remain intact. Other countries also promoted alternative plans, but Turkey ignored them just the same, as it was frustrated that no foreign funding was coming in for the project. No one could stop the disaster rolling toward the 10,000-year-old city. The dam was set to be built exactly where it was originally planned, right where it posed the greatest threat to Hasankeyf. As we already know, Ilisu was built and the reservoir was filled. What did the city's residents and heritage lovers get in return? Turkey built a new town with 710 houses and relocated those who didn't want to move too far from their home. They didn't even bother coming up with a new name. The settlement was called Hasankeyf. Some of the treasures of the original Hasankeyf, including the 18th century palace of the Artukid dynasty, a 15th century mosque, and the ruins of a Byzantine citadel were moved. Along with them, 8 more landmarks were preserved, including the Roman city gates and the massive tomb of Zeno Bey. But the rest got swallowed up by deep waters. They said that building the dam and the reservoir it created would bring more tourists. And sure, who wouldn't want to check out a lake nestled in the mountains? But no one really considered the fact that Hasankeyf, at 10,000 years old, is a way bigger magnet for tourists from all over the world. Let's be real. No one ever thought tourism was the only perk of building this giant dam. There are plenty of other benefits we've already discussed, and they made sure the dam on the Tigris River didn't get canceled. You think that's the end of the downsides? Not quite. In fact, the spot where the reservoir sits today was once home not only to the city of Hasankeyf, but also to 199 other settlements, which meant a total of about 80,000 people had to be relocated to new places. You know what else? People can move even if they're not happy about it, but animals can't. The dam has affected a bunch of species that used to live around here. Take salmon, for example, the most obvious victim. You know, the biggest threat to fish isn't some predator, but dams, right? See, normally salmon swim upstream to spawn, that is, to reproduce. But when millions of tons of concrete block their way, they just can't get where they need to go. The result is a population drop, extinction. Basically, it's a textbook domino effect. One local species disappears and others follow. Here in the Tigris, there are many species that, like salmon, swim upstream to spawn. That's why building a dam has led to a decline in other fish species too. To be more specific, the river used to boast dozens of species, but now the fish population has dropped by half. There are fewer of the ray-finned manger now, a fish whose weight can reach up to almost 220 pounds. The leopard barbel is on the verge of extinction. The Euphrates soft-shelled turtle has also been added to the list of vulnerable species. This species already faced issues due to a bunch of Turkish dams on the Euphrates, but with the construction of the Ilisu dam, the turtle population has drastically declined in the Tigris as well. The ones who could, logically speaking, fly over the reservoir without worrying about the rising water masses will also suffer. Before the flooding, there were meadows in the river valley where, for example, the lesser kestrel used to live. In general, you get the idea. The Ilisu Dam is a pretty controversial project. However, it seems that the benefits, such as a huge amount of energy, jobs, and large irrigated areas, still outweigh the downsides.